to Angel Heart Radio. I'm Annette McCoy, and this morning we have a real treat because it's not Rosemary Butterworth, who I'm normally with at this time. It's her gorgeous husband, John. John, thank you so much for stepping in for Rosemary. How apt that the topic today is what is it? Being kind. And Rosemary is being kind to herself. She's finally listening to her body and knows that she'd be pushing the envelope.
She would be indeed.
How wonderful that you're able to step in for her, because I know we're in for a treat with what you have to share with us.
Mm.
People, we'd like to...
Go on.
Sorry.
No, the first treat I wanted to share was when I heard what the topic was, it instantly brought back to mind. Do you remember the saying years ago of random acts of kindness?
Yes.
Okay, when Sydney Harbour Bridge had bridge tolls, you had to actually pay a coin to a man or drop it in whatever. Somebody one day decided to pay the toll for the car immediately behind them. So when they came out to pay, the toll collector was able to say, the car in front paid for you. And it just spread like wildfire. And it became known as one of many random acts of kindness. And it's funny that I should suddenly remember that, from all those years ago. Yeah, because now it's all fully automated and electronic, and you can't do that anymore.
No, that's... I like it if I'm in the supermarket and somebody might be looking for that little bit of change if they're paying by cash. And it's wonderful to be able to say, look, here's the 5 cents or the 10 cents or the dollar, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So having discovered what the title for today is, the subject matter, I went quiet, and what instantly comes to mind is that the essential essence, that's a bit repetitive, of kindness is selflessness, right? It's having regard for the needs of the other person or the other situation or the other animal, the other whatever, and not being self-centered. And in the world that we live, we're constantly bombarded with this emphasis on self-satisfaction, on selfishness of people, acquiring goods, material goods or whatever, satisfying short-term desires, all about me. Social media has sort of aided and abetted that, in that people can put imagery online and present the image they'd like the world to see of themselves on various social media platforms, which may not be exactly the way they look now. I remember years ago when I was, one of the many things I did was I was a casual musician in Sydney, working clubs and whatever. And you go into the vestibule of a club you were playing at that particular night, and there'd be a notice board up of who was the entertainer for the night that you were, as a musician, going to have to back. And there would be a photo taken 20, 30 years before of how they looked. And of course, the reality was 20, 30 years later, they didn't look anything like that. So just coming back to the essence of kindness, this focus on the needs of others is the true essence. And then I got thinking about the word kind, and I didn't do German, Rosemary did, but when I think of the word kindergarten, that's obviously from German, Kindergarten, caring for children. So I presume in German, kind means child or relates to children, the care that they need to be given. And that's sort of, it's kind of infused that word kind with that energy, that if you're caring for children, little children, you have to care for all their needs. right? From moment to moment to moment to moment. And that comes from an act of love, which is in the heart of every single human being.
Mm.
What's gradually happening in the world, fortunately, is many, many people are awakening to that essential love that's in the heart, which is the true connection with God in every human being, and awakening to that, and more living more selfless lives, lives that are focused on being of service to others. So I don't know how you feel about that, or whether you wanted to comment on that.
Well, I totally agree. I think finally it's wonderful that people are really sharing the love and becoming more aware that that's the way to go. You know, when we can let go of our fears and live in love, it's going to be such a much better world. And I think slowly we're getting there. There's some lovely things to look at the positives of any situation, John. Social media is fantastic when it's used in a positive way. Aren't we so fortunate that we can bring ourselves into other people's lives? You know, people might be at work and be able to have us playing in the background. People might be cleaning their house and having us in the background. Who knows where we're spreading this message? And it's wonderful to have Julie Kiss with us. Julie's a regular, and she's saying, hi, beautiful souls. Isn't it wonderful to know that we are all beautiful? And today we'd like to concentrate on spreading the kindness. And I don't know about you, John, but I know that when I do spread kindness, I feel really, really good in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's an act of love. And it's what we essentially are, what our souls are. I just I'd like to raise another aspect of kindness, which I don't think any of us would normally think of, but it came to me last night to say let's go to bed. A lot of fast food chains in the world are pushing foods that there's much controversy about, and they provide a great service for those who are in a hurry, don't have time to cook and whatever. But there has been, as you well know, a lot of criticism of the nutritious content of the food. Not only their foods, but also virtually every processed food on the shelves of the supermarket that I've seen contains sugar. I don't know if you're aware of that. But you pick up anything on the shelf in the supermarket that's in a jar, in a bottle, or whatever, go through the ingredients, and it will have sugar in it. So those that are in the market of retailing foodstuffs, processed foodstuffs, be it cooked fresh food, be it bottled or in a jar or whatever, are doing this to make it taste nicer so that you want more of the product. But if they truly, truly, truly were kind in their hearts and only had kindness as their motive, then they might modify the contents, mightn't they? Because we've all heard about how potentially destructive sugar is to human beings if taken in excess, both as carbohydrates with people becoming obese, but also affecting other parts, other aspects of human health, such as diabetes, etc. So it was a curious twist that was just given to me as I say, as I was going to bed, that we tend to think of acts of kindness between human beings, individual human beings, but this was suddenly taking it up to the corporate level. So I don't know if you've got any reflections or thoughts about that.
Well, what comes to my mind is cooking with love. And there are so many, fortunately. I think in the last couple of years, people have looked to maybe new businesses, or because the food industry, you're right, is a huge money making, because we see people going out for coffees these days. It's just something that people do. A lot pick up a takeaway coffee on their way to work. It's simply a routine.
Yep.
And I'm aware of the energy in different places. There are some places, I walked into one the other day, the gorgeous Callista Tea Rooms up in our Dandenong Ranges. I walked in with a girlfriend and we both commented. The staff were wonderful. They were obviously very happy in their work. The food was delicious and nutritious, and it was a joy to be there. You'll be going back for sure.
Yeah.
And so there is a different feel, I believe, in some places.
Yeah. Something else I thought might be fun to do was I Googled earlier sayings of kindness. So I'll just read a few of them that just instantly come up. Let's see what we've got. Do things for people, not because of who they are or what they do in return, but because of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I like that one.
Be the reason someone smiles. Be the reason someone feels loved and believes in the goodness in people. See what else we've got here. This is, I just hit kindness on Google. Yes, what did you say?
That first one is so apt. When we give through our heart, rather than like if I'm thinking, oh well, I'll shout the meal today, and someone will do. If we do it with an expectation, it never works. Whereas if we do it with love, purely doing it because that's what we want to do, that's what we can do at that particular time, comes back tenfold. It's amazing.
I just discovered there is a foundation called the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation. So there you go. You can actually Google them. www.randomactsofkindness.org. So there you
Beautiful.
go. Further than what we were saying before.
Yes.
And the Dalai Lama, be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. I don't know if many people are conscious of it, but the Dalai Lama is actually Avalokiteshvara. He's the Buddha of compassion in incarnation, actually amongst us. Rosemary has met him and shaken hands and shared energy with him. I have a cloth that was blessed by him. This is enormous, and we just see the name mentioned quickly on the news as it was the other night. There's something about a video about him or who's going to be his successor. I don't know what that was about, but it's an extraordinary thing that we have living in the world with us, the Buddha of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. And I don't know whether you've ever listened to his story of how he was selected. We borrowed a CD from a library once and listened to it while we were travelling, and it went through how he left his last incarnation, and then how the lamas, the high lamas, were guided to find him in this life as a little boy. It's the most extraordinary story, totally true. And he tells it with chuckles and laughs and so forth. And then when he finally got to the Patala, as a little toddler, he went rushing along the corridors and down this one, opened this door and whatever, and opened a cupboard and took out a drawer and took out an old pair of spectacles and put them on his nose. And they said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, these are mine. These were mine in my last incarnation, you know." And quite apart from having to identify sacred objects, which was part of his test of being chosen, identified, it was light-hearted things like that. Anyway, I'm getting onto the subject of kindness. But if anybody truly epitomizes kindness and the practice of kindness, it is the Dalai Lama, because it is said that despite what happened with the invasion in 1959 of his homeland, him having to go elsewhere to live, to Dharamsala, that he still sends love to the Chinese, even though they are reputed to have killed and maltreated many of his countrymen. So he's certainly a wonderful, the very epitome of kindness. So,
well, simply seeing him and his smile, he is a truly wonderful soul.
Rosemary said, if I can just quickly say this, the night that she met him, she was invited to the University of New South Wales by some very senior people in that organisation, and they stood in a line, and he came along the line, greeting each one of them. And she said, when he was in front of her, he was totally 100% present with her there. It wasn't just the superficial, oh, here we go, yet another one. He was right there with her, looked deep into her eyes. And that transfer of love, that instantaneous love and blessings, from the Buddha of compassion, it's extraordinary. Over to Julie. Julie has a comment. Julie has a question.
Julie was saying, I try so hard to be kind to everyone around me. I treat others how I want to be treated.
Lovely way of putting it. It's sort of like the Christian saying, isn't do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Look, I think it's appropriate here that I said to you before we came on air that I know the story that is all about kindness. Superficially, at first, it seems to be just about forgiveness. But when I reflected on it quietly last night, I realised it's probably so appropriate to share. And this is an absolutely true story. I'm going to use real names because the individuals concerned are either have passed or would have no objection. So if we can go back to 1957, and I'm in first year at North Sydney Boys High School, and there was one amongst us whose name was Charles Troutman, and he'd had polio. He was American, so that was slightly unusual, having an American amongst us. And the polio had left him slightly disfigured, his face particularly, I seem to remember he had cracked lips, and I think he had some scars or whatever. And some of the other boys bullied him mercilessly, really, really bullied him. It was just awful to see. And I would stand at a distance and see this going on. And as a young schoolboy, I didn't know what else to do about it. I just witnessed it happening. That was 1957. Shortly after Charles left, apparently when you go on the internet and look him up, and you can look up Charles Troutman, I think his father went back to America on business. So Charles, I'll reveal that bit in a minute. So if we can move from 1957 through to the year 2000, now I'll let you do the math on that. What's that, 47 years?
43 years.
43 years. So 43 years later, we had been 12-year-old schoolboys. So we're now, 55? All of us who've been in that group.
65.
A thing called the internet had come along. And from sort of the advent of internet, one or two of them who'd been in that class that year that had gone right through high school connected with each other and said, hey, wouldn't it be great to catch up? And little by little, they acquired email addresses of other people who'd been in the year. And in turn, they got my email address. So what they started doing was organising reunions once every 5 or 10 years. I forget what it was. I think it was once every 10 years. And they get together and have a reunion. And first of these I went to was about 1990. And I won't go into the details of that now because it's not relevant to the story. So about the year 2000, one of them doing this regular email chat as they were doing, because they'd formed like an email group, as you would understand, suddenly came forward with the following proposition. He said, hey, some of you guys out there, some of us seriously, severely bullied Charles Troutman in first year of high school in 1957. One of our number, Chris Barry, left school in fourth year, not fifth year then, and he went off and joined the armed forces, and he rose in subsequent years to become Chief of Australian Defence Forces, Admiral Chris Barry. He was one of our number. I didn't know him personally very well. I just knew of his name. He then said on the email, when Chris became Chief of the Australian Defence Forces, he instigated a program of trying to stamp out, eradicate bullying with new intakes into the armed forces, which we've all heard of directly or indirectly over the years, that somebody enters, a military academy or whatever, and they're put through some sort of brutal initiation ceremony or whatever, and really given a hard time to see if they're tough enough and man enough and all the rest of it. So he said, Chris has instigated this program into the Australian Defence Forces. This is all the Army, all the Navy, all the Air Force in Australia, this program. Why don't we and Chris was part of this email group, by the way. Why don't we take a leaf out of Chris's book, and why don't we collectively, those of us who bullied Charles Troutman, send him a collective apology? I've got to tell you, I was in tears.
Mm-hmm.
Tears. That these men at whatever age you just worked out they were, in their 50s or 60s, should suddenly come to this awakening, or this one man proposing this act of kindness to this person that they had bullied all those years before. And he said, hey, I've gone on Google and I've discovered all about Charles Troutman. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because Charles went back to America, and having been bullied, and he might have got bullied again in America because of the way he looked with his scars from the polio, he must have developed a determination to fight for justice in his life and in the lives of others, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or And so he studied law, and he rose up through the legal ranks. And you might have heard stories from Dr. John DeMartini, similar stories to this, where somebody was bullied or raped or whatever, and they used that as a springboard to overcome that and be better than that and help and inspire others. So he said, I've read on Google that Charles Troutman went on to become a judge in the US Supreme Court. And he's now Attorney General of the island of Guam, which I think is the US protectorate or something, northeast of Australia. He's written some of their legislation. So those of you who feel that they were part, or know they were part of the bullying, why don't we do this group email to him and apologise? So they did. And they had a reunion coming up a couple of months later at Lane Cove Country Club golf course here down there in Sydney. And lo and behold, one day the email goes out, hey guys, we sent that group apology to Charles Troutman in Guam. Well, guess what? He's flying down from Guam and he's going to come to our reunion on Saturday week. So I went along to that, thinking I was there primarily for that reason. It turned out I was there for a very different reason, which was to, just as an aside, there was a lady there from the Caribbean who was married to one of our ex-number, who was partly crippled, and I found myself receiving guidance to tell her how she could draw on her traditions, her native traditions, to give healing to him for his crippled condition. And she and I sat in the bar doing all that, and then I waved goodbye and left. he thought I was hitting on his wife. I wasn't. Anyway, so getting back to Charles Troutman, lo and behold, Charles walked in. And by now he was an old man with a walking stick, I seem to remember. And he went round Annette and he eyeballed each and every one who had bullied him and forgave them. What an act of kindness that was. What an act of love. And he said, I forgive you. Let's get over it. Let's move on. I've moved on. Let's all move on. And that deeply touched me. It's in part of the writings I've done. It's in Rosemary's book under the chapter on forgiveness too. So I just wanted to offer up that anecdote, that very, very special story, a very true story. You can go on Google, you can read about Charles Troutman, Admiral Chris Barry. So,
well, John, thank you for sharing. And Arlene has joined us and she said, bravo to Charles.
Yeah. He's since passed, by the way. I think if you go on Google, you find that he has crossed over. So, yeah. So that leads me, if I may, to go into sharing the story of the writings that I've been guided to do, or actually commanded to do. I'm talking about divine command over the last whatever. Can I move over to that topic, or is there anyone in the chat room wanting to talk more about kindness? Or
well, I think it all dovetails, doesn't it, beautifully?
Yeah.
So you've been
yes, I'll just pick it up. Back in the 1990s, as you're well aware, Rosemary in the early 90s had received divine guidance through some channeled writings to a young schoolgirl to go to a rainforest somewhere in the world where she would meet with Archangel Michael because he wanted to meet with her to convey information to her. And she did that. And of course, you know the story, it's an astonishing story. And I've written a module about that, even though it's covered elsewhere. So we were running then the organisation that he asked that we set up, which we called the Southern Cross Academy of Light. And we were living in a suburb of Sydney, renting a house. And there was a lady called Joan Moylan, again, you can Google her, a remarkable clairvoyant, remarkable psychic. As she says, Sai Baba calls her doubly psychic. And Joan came and stayed with us once or twice. And she used to do back-to-back readings. Wherever she goes in the world, she's just so sought after for her psychic abilities. And Joan, one morning over breakfast, I can't remember where it was, she just turned to me, she said, John, you're meant to be writing. I said, writing? Writing what? She said, you're meant to be writing. Okay. And knowing that she received very clear guidance, and guidance from Sai Baba, we had a computer set up under the staircase leading downstairs, and I then used to purchase her after dinner each night, and I just started typing the story of my life because I didn't know what else to write about, and I really didn't. And this went on for a little while, and then we got caught up with running the academy, with academy events. I got caught up with running my Sacred Sound program, and all that then led on to eventually when we acquired Jacaranda Haven, where I am right now, and so on and so on and so forth. Both our mothers passing over. So in other words, I got consumed in other matters, my day job, and I had no time for writing. And then one night in sleep, in the late 90s, Sai Baba came to me in a clear dream, not a dream, vision, full colour, where he was walking up a flight of stairs and there was a big crowd and I was in the crowd, and he turned around and pointed straight at me and said, call me and put a party. And he pointed straight at me, and you know when you're being called. He said, call me and put a party. So on waking, I told Rosemary about that. So we naturally booked a flight to India, and we went to India, and firstly we went to what's called Whitefield Vrindavan, which was one of his ashrams. And then on the very final day, we went across to Puttaparthi because he'd suddenly moved over there. Very long story, so I'm just trying to compress it. We went to Darshan one morning, just that one morning, and he's walking around. There must have been 10,000 people in the Mandir, easily 10,000. So he's just this little orange speck in the distance, and he came up near, and I'm in my brain, mind saying, Swami, you told me to call you and put a party. I'm here, I'm calling you. Nothing that I could tell. And so we left Darshan, and I was absolutely devastated. And we went across the road to our hotel, got our bags, got in our taxi. We had this hard taxi and started to head out of town. Thousands of people milling on the main street of Puttaparthi. When suddenly the taxi stopped and two white-coated men jumped in the front seat next to the driver with Rosemary and I in the back. And he started to take on. I said, this is our taxi, you know. He said, driver turned around and said, if you don't want Sai Baba's bodyguards to travel with us, then just say so. I went, that's fine. So off we took, and the two bodyguards were chuckling because they knew what was about to happen. So within minutes of having got in, the one sitting directly in front of me pivoted around and gave me, he said, this is from Swami. And there was, not this particular one, but there was a pen. And it was blue and gold. Just an ordinary ballpoint pen. I was wearing a blue and gold shirt that day, would you believe? Because it was very big in my life at that time. So I was gifted a pen and some vibhuti, which he said will help your eyes. I was just crying like I wouldn't believe, crying. Because what I'd done, I'd surrendered. As we left the ashram, I just surrendered. I said, okay, Baba, I surrender. And he says, the moment you surrender and let go, I'll come to you. And poof, the pen, and they gave vibhuti to Rosemary too, and she was in tears because she'd been praying to be gifted vibhuti. So this was step number 2. I was given a pen by Sai Baba. So the years ticked by, and I didn't quite know what to do with the pen. Silly, what do you do with the pen? You're right. Mm-hmm. Then the next thing that happened was that up here at Jacaranda Haven, as you all know, Annette, we built a labyrinth that you can walk to meditate and contemplate. And we built it about 100 metres east of the house here, out in the middle of a paddock, beautiful lavender labyrinth. And on the completion of that in about 2010, I was the first one to walk it because I designed it and laid it out and built most of it. And I walked it and I got to the centre and just stood and emptied. And this loud voice thundered in my head, you are a child of God, and it is your God-given role to help others remember they are children of God also. Now, was it God? Was it Sai Baba? Was it? I call it the divine decree. But once I was commanded that, I had to think, how was I going to help others remember they're children of God also? So nothing happened for a few years because we were caught up with still working in Sydney, running the academy. Then I retired in 2017 and we came up here to live full-time, as you're aware. Handed over the reins of the academy to others, had the name changed to Academy of Light Incorporated, which is now running with a slightly changed structure and so forth, but in capable hands. At the beginning of last year, I was out on the ride-on mower in the paddock, quite empty in the mind, and this is important, just driving the ride-on mower around the vegetable gardens and whatever, and a voice boomed in my head, Jennifer Starlight wants to do a session with you. Where did that come from? It was a divine command. Jennifer Starlight wants to do a session with you. Who's Jennifer Starlight? Jennifer is a clear medium and channel from southeast Queensland. Beautiful lady, beautiful being, who I'd met through the academy, who I'd had session with in the past. So I rang Jen up. Jen, it's John. guess what I've been told? Okay, so we book a time for a session, and I get on the phone with her because it was a phone session. And the first thing, I think, the very first thing she said was, "You are meant to be writing. Why aren't you writing? You're being told to write." And then I came out of that, and there was other guidance as well. I came out of that wondering, okay, what do I write about? And I'm being commanded to help others remember they're children of God. And I thought, all I can write about is my own experiences. Duh. So suddenly the penny drops, and I started writing. I started going up into our, as you know, Annette, our loft office here at the Octagon here. While Rosemary would have a rest after lunch, I'd go up. And a year later, I'm still going up and writing a bit more and a bit more, a bit more. And I was swiftly guided to call it an autobiographical spiritual anthology. And the name of it is Ascent, A-S-C-E-N-T, an autobiographical spiritual anthology. And it's consisting of, to date, 15 modules. Each module is a separate article, item on its own. What are they about? Well, one's about karma. One's about forgiveness. One's about the evolution of Jacaranda Haven. One's about Rosemary and the remarkable life that she's led. One's about food. Another one's about healing. Another one's about heart connections, very dear subject to my self. Extraterrestrial origins, and so forth. Archangel Michael and the evolution of the Southern Cross Academy of Light. So 15 modules have been written to date. So they're individual modules. They can be read on their own, or they can be read as a group, or you can just pick between them like a smorgasbord. I've just about finished the writing that I'm told to do so far. Mm-hmm. At which I'm going to get all the hard copy photos out of our boxes and whatever, and around the house, and electronic photos, and start populating, illustrating the text with photographs. And then the most likely outcome is I'll set up a little website with a link where people can go onto the web and just click on any module or all of them that they're interested in reading. So I've also included a timeline. I was told very clearly one afternoon, I was having a little nap of an afternoon, include a timeline to help the reader gain a sense of this happened after this. So the timeline's about the spiritual events in my life, focusing just on that. And then I've got another one just talking kind of normal everyday living stuff from 1945, which is when I was born in this life, up to 1992, because after 92 the modules take off. So the other thing that's springboarded out of that is that, and I'll just keep this very short, is that we heard of somebody doing a video of a practitioner, and it suddenly inspired me to say to Rosemary, we should do a documentary on you, on your remarkable life, which I intend to call Rosemary Butterworth's Celebration of a Remarkable Life. And we've got all the material. I've written the module all about her and her life as the script, the raw script. We have the camera and sound recording here within the family. We have photographs. We've got old Super 8 film footage that we can use from her family, early family days and so forth. We've had Zoom, drone footage over the property. Yeah, over the property here, Jacaranda Haven, and so forth. So we had a gathering here, and I'll wrap up at this point. We had a gathering here, one of our monthly gatherings, a couple of weeks ago, and I knew in my heart that someone was going to be at the gathering who could edit all this. And lo and behold, there was a man here who's been up around the Port Macquarie area for a while. And I called across to him. I said, "Son, what is it that you do? You're not going to believe it. I'm a film director and producer." I said, "Do you happen to have an editing suite?" He said, "I do. That's what I do for a living." When I told him over afternoon tea about the vision for the video for Rosemary, covering her as family matriarch, which she is now, very much the matriarch of a very large family, about her work as a spiritual counsellor, one of the founders of the Southern Cross Academy of Light, as a Sai Baba devotee, a living inspiration in terms of trust in God because of the stories that you know and I know about her, and her love of birds and of animals and her artist and so forth, being a remedial therapist. So there you go. I'll be quiet.
Beautiful. It's so true, John. When we trust, and it doesn't matter, we all have different terminology sometimes, whether we're talking God, the universe, whatever. I just believe that when we trust, we are shown, we're guided in what we do. The people turn up in our lives. This morning, the ladies in the village who are relatively new to my life, and we were asking each other, you know, what's your past been, etc. And I've become well aware that I'm a networker. Apt. My name's very apt, isn't it? But it's, yes, I tend to link, and also because I do a lot of work with recycling, I've been led to people, I've been introduced to people, I've been introduced to organisations so that I'm able to do this work. And it seems that, yes, you've been called upon to do this writing and now to create a film on Rosemary. How wonderful.
Yeah. I've never done a film. It's everything you do once, you know, so yeah. Yes. What do they say? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So we've got all the bits, it's just a matter of putting it all together. So yeah.
Delightful.
The other aspect I wanted to raise about kindness, if we can just jump back to kindness, is Rosemary's first husband, his family were noted for their kindness, particularly his mother. The door was always open, there was always a pot of stew on the table, and Rosemary often talked so fondly about those early days. And that kindness has gone right through her children, her 4 children, and in turn their children, because Rosemary has 15 grandchildren. We're up to 10, nearly 11 great-grandchildren on her side. But that kindness has gone through, you know, like the DNA or whatever, through that family. And if there's one characteristic that stands head and shoulders for her family, it's their kindness. And I've often said that, how blessed I am to have married into such a kind family, a kindly family. Yeah.
Yes, and when we become aware of how simple it is to be kind, you mentioned before about the smile, and a smile, a hug. I joined a global organisation, I think, that free hugs, and I know people have stood with billboards in
I've seen
popular
that,
areas like shopping centres or whatever, and free hug. And because we do need to be aware of other people, and some people, if I'm meeting someone for the first time, I automatically hug or want to hug, but I tend to ask, are you a hugger? Because for some people that can be invasive and not a loving gesture, as I like to think of it.
Rose, yeah. Anyway, as I say, Rosemary's family is just characterised by this incredible kindness, really loving kindness, yeah. The other thing, just as we wrap up, is the whole thing of cause and effect, or action and reaction, or karma as they're called in India, that in these acts of love, these acts of kindness, they inevitably, not that one does it for this reason, but they're inevitably going to bring propitious, if you like, karma upon the the person who's been kind or the person who's been gentle or considerate or whatever. And another thing I'd just like to raise, I know this sounds crazy, but let's just be crazy for a minute. Israel and Palestine constantly attack each other, and Russia's invaded Ukraine and so forth. An act of incredible leadership and bravery would be for one nation that gets attacked, would it not, to go, okay, enough's enough. We forgive you for attacking us this time. We're not going to retaliate. We're not going to shell you back or bomb you back or whatever. We're just going to send you love and forgiveness. Could you imagine what a game changer that would be globally?
Indeed.
Now, the people, the elected people, a lot of whom are very angry, and you've only got to look at the film footage. Rosemary was telling me she was looking at footage on ABC News yesterday of the anger on the streets of Ireland with people, throwing petrol bombs, and they're discovering pipe bombs, and you see the crowds in Gaza or Israel because of the latest shellings or whatever, rushing through the streets carrying the body above them, and the anger and whatever. They would say that would be weakness on the part of their government. But if it ever happens, it could be a game changer, could it not?
Absolutely.
An act of being like the Dalai Lama and going, okay, you've done this to us. This time we're not going to retaliate. We're not going to keep shelling you. We're just going to stand our ground and send you love and forgiveness. Okay.
And whilst you're talking about countries there, John, the thing is that we as individuals, we can do that. If somebody has hurt us, and that starts a whole new thing, because I believe we take on the offence or the hurt. It's up to us whether we do that or not. And so
Absolutely.
We can do so much within our own lives, which of course is what today is all about. Being kind to ourselves, being kind to others. And
to see,
world.
to see that if somebody has attacked you or performed an act of violence physically and or through words or whatever, spoken or written, that it's coming out of their fear, their insecurity. That's where anger comes from. And to then send them love and forgiveness and just understand that without reacting, without causing it a further action. Yeah.
Yes.
I was caught up in a chain of events years ago, which I've written about. I'm not going to go into any detail now, where I had lawyers telling me to initiate a defamation action. They were looking at the thieves, you know what I mean? There's the dollar sign, that little dollar signs in their eyes, because they're out to win business for their law firm. But I knew the repercussions they could have for me and my family, my mother, my ex-wife, my children, whatever. And I realised it would have been just another retaliatory act. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Retaliation, and there would then be retaliation back and forth. It would get in the press. The press would make a meal of it, you know what I mean? There would be denials and just awful. So I just stopped. To the frustration of the lawyers, I just stopped. I said, no, won't engage in this any further. It's complete. What happened happened. I know why it happened. Decades later, I understand why it happened. For karmic reasons, due to what I'd done in a past life. But now it's complete, it's finished. I'm totally innocent, and I'm not about to engage in further retaliatory or violent action about it, which initiating a defamation action, whilst looking very respectable and, well, yes, he deserves it, oh, look how the way he's been treated and all the rest. No. Just step back from it and allow it to be. And if that could only happen on an international level between the Russias and the Ukraines, between Gaza, Palestinians and the Israelis. Anyway, I'll leave it with you there. I've got nothing else. You want to explore anything else?
Well,
I'm happy to sit here and talk.
Thank you.
I heard it.
No, I think that's a really nice, appropriate end to the show.
Can I just quickly interpose another thing? A gentleman called Isaac Tigrit, who started the Hard Rock Cafe chain and the House of Blues chain, who was a cyber devotee and is an incredible philanthropist, an astonishing life. I was privileged enough, Rosemary heard part of it too, to hear a Zoom interview with him a few months ago around the occasion of Mahashivaratri. And he's riddled with cancer. He's, how he's still walking and living, no one knows. And he was occasionally coughing and spluttering, having a drink of coconut water or coconut milk. And the people who were conducting, who had been the Annette McCoys, who were conducting the session, there were three of them, kept apologising. There were two Indians and one in America, kept saying, "Oh, Isaac, sir, you are so sick, we must let you go, we must." And Isaac saying, "Hey guys, I'm here, I'm doing my work, this is my job. I'll talk as long as you guys want to talk." He took it out to 2 hours. They just went for 2 hours until they finally wrapped it up, because he sat there and he said, "I will keep talking as long as people have questions." And there were questions coming from all around the world. And he shared some extraordinary information, by the way, unheard of information about where we're all heading in the future. It was this thing of, I'll talk as long as you want to talk. Right. 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours. As long as I'm sitting here, I might fall over and die in the process, but I'm just going to keep talking until you say you've had enough or you turn me off or something. So thank you, Annette, for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you, John. And thank you to all of our audience. It's been another wonderful session. Much love to Rosemary. May she continue to listen to her body and to be kind to herself. And that's certainly our message this morning, today. Be kind to yourself and then let the kindness flow. Simple, simple things. It can be a phone call to someone who, we never know, do we, John, what our little acts of kindness can mean to other people. So please keep being kind, because it's a really lovely feeling. Spread the love, as we say. And so thank you, John. Next week, everybody, I'm back with Marnie Perner. We did a bit of a switch around this time round. Marnie's normally at this time of the month. She's going to be with me next week. In the meantime, let's spread the kindness. Much love to you all. Thank you, John.